The phone rings at 3 in the morning. Your heart already knows something is wrong before your brain catches up. A voice on the other end delivers news that splits your life into before and after. Someone you love is gone. Or maybe it's different. Maybe you walk into work on a Tuesday morning and they hand you a box. 20 years of your life dismissed in a 5-minute conversation. Or perhaps it's the moment you discover betrayal. The person you trusted most has been lying to you for months, maybe years. Everything you believed was solid turns out to be smoke. In that moment, what happens inside you? For most people, the answer is collapse. Complete, total, devastating collapse. The mind fractures, the body shuts down, the world becomes unrecognizable, they break. And sometimes they never fully recover. But here's what's fascinating. Throughout history, there have been people who faced the exact same circumstances and didn't break. They bent, certainly. They felt the pain, absolutely, but they didn't shatter. They absorbed the blow, processed it, and somehow found a way to keep moving forward, not just surviving, but eventually thriving. What's the difference? Is it genetics, luck, some mysterious resilience that some people have and others don't? The Stoics, those ancient philosophers who faced plagues, wars, exile, torture, and death with remarkable composure, would tell you the answer is much simpler and much more uncomfortable. The difference is preparation. The people who break under pressure are the ones who never prepared for pressure. And the people who endure are the ones who trained their minds long before the storm arrived. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what I'm about to share could be the difference between breaking and bending the next time life decides to test you. And trust me, life will test you. The only question is whether you'll be ready. Let me paint a picture of what happens in most minds when crisis hits. Imagine your brain as a control room. In normal times, everything runs smoothly. The operators are calm, the systems are functioning, life is manageable. But when extreme pressure arrives, when real crisis strikes, something happens in that control room. Alarms start blaring, red lights flash everywhere. The operators panic. They start pushing random buttons, pulling random levers, making everything worse. Within minutes, the whole system crashes. This is what mental collapse looks like from the inside. Your rational mind, the part that usually helps you solve problems, goes offline. Your emotional brain, the ancient survival system that evolved for physical threats, takes over completely. But here's the problem. That emotional system was designed for running from predators and fighting enemies. It wasn't designed for processing job loss, or grief, or betrayal, or financial ruin. So it misfires. It floods your body with stress hormones that have nowhere to go. It creates panic where calm is needed. It amplifies everything until the pain becomes unbearable. And you break. The Stoics observed this pattern 2,000 years ago. They watched people crumble under pressure that, objectively, shouldn't have destroyed them. And they asked a profound question: why does this happen? What makes a human mind so fragile? Seneca, who served as advisor to Emperor Nero and lived under constant threat of execution, wrote extensively about this. He noticed that the people who broke most completely were often the ones who had been most comfortable, the ones who had lived soft lives, the ones who had never been tested. And he realized something that sounds harsh, but contains deep wisdom. Excessive comfort creates fragility. Think about that for a moment. We spend our entire lives trying to eliminate discomfort. We want perfect climate control, endless entertainment, food whenever we're hungry, distraction whenever we're bored. We optimize for comfort in every possible way, and in doing so, we accidentally train ourselves to be incapable of handling discomfort. It's like an immune system that's never been exposed to germs. The first real infection doesn't just make it sick, it devastates it completely, because it never learned to fight. If this is starting to make sense, hit that like button right now. This simple gesture tells me I'm reaching people who are ready to hear what most won't say out loud. Now let me show you the contrast. Let me show you what happens in a mind that's been properly prepared. Marcus Aurelius was arguably the most powerful man in the world during his reign as Roman emperor. He had access to every comfort imaginable, every pleasure, every luxury, every escape from reality that existed at the time. But instead of indulging, he trained. Every single morning he would sit down and write in his journal, preparing his mind for the day ahead. And what did he write about? The worst things that could happen. He would remind himself that people would lie to him that day, that they would be ungrateful, arrogant, and dishonest. He would contemplate the possibility of failure, of loss, of his own death. He wasn't being pessimistic, he was being prepared. When those things actually happened, and they did happen constantly, he wasn't shocked. His mind didn't crash because it had already run the simulation. The blow landed on a prepared surface instead of a fragile one. This is the fundamental difference between the common reaction and the Stoic reaction to crisis. The common reaction is surprise, then panic, then collapse. The Stoic reaction is recognition, then acceptance, then response. One person says, "I can't believe this is happening to me." The other says, "I knew this could happen, and now it has. Let me deal with it." The gap between those two responses might seem small in words, but in lived experience, it's the difference between destruction and survival. Let me go deeper into this. When the untrained mind encounters crisis, it follows a predictable pattern. First comes denial. This can't be happening. This isn't real. This must be a mistake. The mind refuses to accept what's clearly in front of it because it wasn't prepared for this possibility. Then comes the bargaining. If only I had done something different. Maybe there's still a way to fix this. Perhaps this isn't as bad as it seems. The mind desperately searches for an escape from reality, still not accepting what is. Then comes the flood of emotions, anger, despair, self-pity, fear, all hitting at once like waves in a storm. The person is tossed around, unable to find solid ground. They can't think clearly because their emotional system has completely hijacked their rational mind. And then, often, comes collapse. The person simply can't process what's happening. They shut down. They become paralyzed. They may even dissociate from reality entirely as a last-ditch protective mechanism. This entire sequence can happen in minutes or stretch over weeks, but the pattern is remarkably consistent. Denial, bargaining, emotional flood, collapse. And notice what's missing from this sequence: effective response. The person never actually gets to the part where they deal with the situation because they're too busy being destroyed by it. Now contrast this with the prepared mind. When crisis hits, there's a moment of recognition. This is what I've been preparing for. This is the difficulty I knew could come. This moment of recognition is crucial because it short-circuits the denial phase. There's no "this can't be happening" because the mind already knew it could happen. Then comes rapid acceptance, not passive resignation, but active acceptance. This is reality now. This is what I'm working with. There's no bargaining because the prepared mind understands that reality is not negotiable. What is, simply is. Then comes assessment. What are the facts? What resources do I have? What's within my control? The emotional response is still there, but it's not overwhelming because the mind has practiced feeling these emotions in a controlled way. The person can think and feel simultaneously. And then comes response. Actual, effective, purposeful action. The person moves toward solving the problem rather than being crushed by it. This entire sequence can happen in moments because the groundwork was laid before the crisis ever arrived. The prepared mind doesn't need to learn how to handle difficulty in the middle of difficulty. It already knows. It just needs to execute. Let me tell you about a concept the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. It's simple but revolutionary. They divided everything in life into two categories: things you can control and things you cannot control. Your thoughts, your actions, your responses, these are within your control. Other people's behavior, external events, the past, the future, these are outside your control. Now here's where most people go wrong. They spend enormous mental energy trying to control what they cannot control. They obsess over what others think of them. They worry endlessly about things that might never happen. They try to change the past through regret. They try to guarantee the future through anxiety. And when reality proves that they have no control over these things, their minds break under the weight of failed effort. The Stoic mind operates differently. It focuses all its energy on what can actually be controlled. When crisis hits, the prepared mind doesn't waste precious resources asking, "Why is this happening?" or "This shouldn't be happening." It immediately moves to "What can I do now? What response is within my power?" Epictetus, the Stoic who was born a slave and later became one of the most influential philosophers in history, put it this way. He said that some things are up to us and some things are not. Up to us are our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions. Not up to us are our bodies, our reputations, our positions, anything that is not our own action. When you truly internalize this distinction, something remarkable happens. About 80% of your anxiety simply vanishes because you stop carrying the impossible burden of controlling the uncontrollable. But this brings us to a crucial question. If mental strength comes from preparation, what does that preparation actually look like? How do you train a mind to withstand pressure before the pressure arrives? The Stoics had a specific practice for this. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every day, they would deliberately imagine the worst things that could happen, not to be morbid, not to attract bad luck, but to remove the element of surprise, which is often what breaks people. Seneca practiced this religiously. He wrote about it in his letters to his friend Lucilius. He would wake up and spend time contemplating loss. What if I lost my wealth today? What if my friends betrayed me? What if I received news of a loved one's death? What if the emperor decided to execute me? He would sit with these possibilities, feel them, process them in advance. And then he would ask himself, if this happened, what would I do? How would I respond? What resources would I have available? By the time any actual misfortune arrived, he had already lived through it mentally. The shock factor was gone. The panic response was diminished. He could think clearly because his mind wasn't overwhelmed by the unexpected. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Imagine you're terrified of losing your job. This fear sits in the back of your mind constantly, creating a low-level anxiety that never quite goes away. You push it down, try not to think about it, distract yourself with other things. Then one day, it happens. You get laid off. And because you never allowed yourself to fully face this possibility, your mind treats it as a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. You panic. You spiral. You feel like your life is over. Now imagine a different approach. Instead of avoiding the fear, you face it head-on. You sit down and really imagine getting laid off. You picture the conversation with your boss. You feel the initial shock. And then you ask, what would I actually do? You would update your resume. You would reach out to your network. You would cut unnecessary expenses. You would apply for new positions. You might discover skills you didn't know you had. You might find opportunities that were invisible when you were comfortable. When you walk through the entire scenario in your mind, you realize something liberating. You would survive. It would be difficult, yes. Painful, probably, but not the end of the world. Not the catastrophe your anxious mind had painted. Now, if you actually do get laid off, your response is completely different. There's still disappointment, still difficulty. But there's no panic, no collapse. Because you already know the path forward. You've already walked it in your imagination. This is what the Stoics meant by mental preparation. It's not about expecting the worst, so you're always miserable. It's about removing the power that unexpected disaster has over you. It's about training your mind to handle anything by having already handled it mentally. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell. If you're the kind of person who seeks this level of understanding, who wants to build genuine mental strength rather than fake positivity, you deserve to keep receiving content that actually makes a difference. Now let's address something that many people misunderstand about Stoicism. They think it's about suppressing emotions, about becoming cold and unfeeling, about pretending pain doesn't exist. This couldn't be further from the truth. The Stoics made a crucial distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Let me explain what that means. When something bad happens, when you experience loss or failure or betrayal, there is a natural pain response. Your body feels it. Your heart feels it. This is not something you can or should try to eliminate. It's part of being human. The Stoics never claimed you could avoid this pain, and they never suggested you should. What they did teach is that we add an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering on top of that natural pain. We add stories about what this means. We add projections about how this will ruin everything. We add comparisons to how things should have been. We add resistance to what is. We add second and third arrows to the first arrow that struck us. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this beautifully. He noted that the thing itself may cause you a brief moment of pain, but it's your judgment about the thing that creates lasting suffering. Someone insults you. The words themselves are just sound waves. The pain comes from your interpretation that you've been diminished, that you must retaliate, that this reflects your worth. The trained mind learns to separate these two things. It feels the initial pain fully, without resistance. But it doesn't add the unnecessary suffering. It doesn't create stories that amplify the damage. It stays with what is actually happening, not what the mind imagines is happening. This is why two people can face the exact same crisis and have completely different experiences. One adds layer upon layer of mental suffering until they're crushed. The other feels the pain, processes it, and moves through it without the additional weight. Let me make this even more concrete. Imagine two people who both lose their jobs on the same day. Same company, same circumstances, same financial pressure. Watch how differently they experience this event. Person A receives the news and their mind immediately starts adding suffering. Why me? This is unfair. I gave them everything and this is how they repay me. I'm never going to find another job. My career is over. What will people think? I'm a failure. My family will lose respect for me. We might lose the house. This spiral continues for days, weeks, sometimes months. Each additional thought adds weight. The actual job loss, painful as it is, becomes secondary to the mountain of mental suffering piled on top. Person B receives the same news. There's pain, genuine disappointment, maybe even some fear about the future. But then their mind moves to different territory. Okay, this happened. It's real. Now what? They feel the pain without adding to it. They don't tell themselves stories about what this means for their worth or their future. They simply experience the reality and then start working on next steps. A month later, both are still job hunting. But person A has aged 10 years from the stress. Their relationships have suffered. Their health has declined. They've been living in hell, not because of the job loss, but because of everything they added to it. Person B has had a difficult month, but is fundamentally okay. They've actually used the time productively, updating skills, exploring new directions, maybe even discovering opportunities they would have missed if they'd stayed employed. Same event. Radically different experience. The difference isn't luck or personality, it's training. It's the practice of separating pain from suffering, of feeling what's real without adding what's imagined. Here's a practical way to understand this. Imagine you're stuck in traffic and you're going to be late for an important meeting. The situation is the situation. You're stuck. You'll be late. That's the reality. Now watch what the untrained mind does. It starts adding, "This is terrible. This always happens to me. The meeting is ruined. They'll think I'm irresponsible. My career might be affected. Why didn't I leave earlier? This city is impossible." And on and on and on. Each of these additions creates more stress, more cortisol, more suffering. But none of them changes the reality. You're still stuck in traffic. You'll still be late. The trained mind sees the situation clearly. Stuck in traffic, will be late. Then it moves to what's within control. I can notify them I'll be late. I can use this time to prepare mentally for the meeting. I can stay calm, so I arrive in the best possible state. No added suffering, just reality and response. This might seem like a small example, but it's actually training for the big moments. Because the person who can stay calm in traffic is developing the same muscle that will help them stay calm in genuine crisis. Mental strength, like physical strength, is built through consistent practice, not through one heroic effort. Let me share what I consider one of the most powerful Stoic exercises for building this strength. It's a daily practice that takes only a few minutes, but can transform your relationship with difficulty. Every morning before you start your day, take 5 minutes to sit quietly and contemplate what could go wrong. Not anxiously, not fearfully, but with calm curiosity. What difficult people might you encounter? What plans might fail? What unexpected challenges might arise? What would you do if you received bad news? Walk through these scenarios mentally. Feel them. Accept that they're possible. And then remind yourself, these things may or may not happen, but if they do, I will handle them. I have the resources to respond. I am not fragile. Then every evening, take another 5 minutes to review your day. Where did you respond well to difficulty? Where did you add unnecessary suffering? What could you have done differently? What did you learn? This practice, done consistently, rewires your brain. It builds new neural pathways for calm response rather than panic reaction. It trains your mind to see difficulty as expected rather than catastrophic. And over time, it creates genuine mental resilience that no amount of positive thinking or affirmation can match. Let me be more specific about what this daily practice looks like in real life. When you wake up, before you check your phone, before you start thinking about your to-do list, you take a few minutes for mental preparation. You might say to yourself something like, "Today, I may face criticism. Someone may disappoint me. A plan may fail. I may receive bad news. These things are possible, and if they happen, I will handle them." You're not hoping for these things. You're not attracting them. You're simply acknowledging reality. Difficulty is part of life. By accepting this truth each morning, you remove the shock factor that breaks most people. Then you go through your day with heightened awareness. When something challenging happens, you notice your reaction. You see the impulse to panic, to blame, to spiral. And because you prepared for difficulty, you have a tiny gap between the event and your response. In that gap, you choose. You choose to respond rather than react. You choose to stay calm rather than escalate. You choose to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. At the end of the day, you review. Not with harsh self-judgment, but with curiosity. Where did I handle things well? Where did I add unnecessary suffering? What triggered my worst reactions? What helped me stay centered? This review is how you learn. It's how you get better at this over time. Some people journal this process. Marcus Aurelius did. His Meditations, which became one of the most influential philosophical texts in history, was never meant for publication. It was his private journal, his daily practice of preparing his mind and reviewing his responses. When you read it, you're literally reading his mental training in action. Other people prefer to do this practice in their head or in quiet meditation. The format matters less than the consistency. You need to do this daily, not because each session creates massive change, but because each session builds on the last. Mental strength is cumulative. It compounds over time. Miss a day, fine. Miss a week, and you start losing ground. Make it a habit for months and years, and you become genuinely unshakable. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent. It's about not automatically agreeing with every impression that enters your mind. When something happens and your brain immediately labels it as terrible or catastrophic, you pause, you question, is this actually terrible? Or is my mind adding stories? Is this truly catastrophic? Or is it simply difficult? Most of the time, you'll find that your initial reaction was exaggerated, that the situation, while challenging, is not the disaster your mind painted. And with that recognition comes relief, clarity, and the ability to actually deal with what's in front of you. Comment below with one thing you've been dreading or fearing that you've never allowed yourself to fully face. Write it out. Because sometimes the simple act of naming our fears begins to diminish their power over us. And you might find that others share the same fear, which means you're not alone in this. Now I want to address something that might seem contradictory. I've been talking about preparing for the worst, about anticipating difficulty, about facing your fears. But doesn't this create a negative mindset? Doesn't this make you pessimistic and anxious? Here's the paradox that the Stoics understood deeply. Facing the possibility of the worst actually makes you more positive, not less, because when you've already processed the worst-case scenario, you're free to fully enjoy the present. You're not constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about what might happen. You've already made peace with what might happen, so you can be here now appreciating what is. It's the people who refuse to think about difficulty who are actually more anxious. Because the fears they won't face consciously are still there, running in the background, creating a subtle but constant sense of dread. The Stoic approach brings those fears into the light, processes them, and thereby neutralizes much of their power. Seneca put it perfectly. He said that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The things we refuse to face haunt us far more than the things we confront directly. By practicing the premeditation of evils, you're not creating suffering. You're actually reducing the total amount of suffering in your life by handling it in controlled doses rather than being overwhelmed by it all at once. Think of it like vaccines. A vaccine exposes you to a small, manageable amount of a pathogen, so your immune system can learn to fight it. The premeditation of evils exposes you to small, manageable amounts of potential difficulty, so your mental immune system can learn to fight it. When the real thing comes, you're prepared. Let me give you another practical example that shows how this works in everyday life. Imagine you're about to have a difficult conversation, maybe with your boss about a raise, maybe with your partner about a recurring problem, maybe with a family member about something painful. The unprepared person goes into this conversation hoping for the best. They imagine it going well. They don't let themselves consider the possibility that it might go badly. And when it does go badly, when the other person reacts defensively or says something hurtful or refuses to budge, they're thrown off completely. They get emotional. They say things they regret. The conversation spirals into conflict. The prepared person takes a different approach. Before the conversation, they sit with the possibilities. What if they react angrily? What if they say no? What if they bring up something I'm not expecting? What if this conversation damages the relationship? They don't just think about these possibilities abstractly. They feel them. They process the emotions in advance. Then they go into the conversation with genuine equanimity, not because they don't care about the outcome, but because they've already made peace with the range of possible outcomes. When the difficult moment comes, they're not shocked. They can stay calm, stay present, and respond effectively rather than reactively. This same principle applies to everything. Job interviews, medical appointments, public speaking, conflict resolution, any situation where things might not go as hoped. The preparation doesn't guarantee a good outcome, but it guarantees that you'll handle whatever outcome occurs with grace and effectiveness. There's another benefit to this practice that most people miss. When you regularly prepare for difficulty, you actually become less anxious, not more. This seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't constantly thinking about bad things make you more worried? But here's what actually happens. Most anxiety comes from the unknown, from fears we refuse to face, from possibilities we won't let ourselves consider. These unexamined fears lurk in the background of our minds, creating a constant low-level dread. When you face these possibilities directly, when you walk through them and see that you could survive them, the fear diminishes. The unknown becomes known. The monster in the dark is revealed to be smaller than you imagined. You're not adding fear by examining it. You're draining fear of its power. Seneca observed this in his own life. He wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that the anticipation of an evil is often worse than the evil itself. By deliberately anticipating, by consciously processing, you actually reduce total suffering rather than increase it. This brings me to a crucial point about timing. Mental strength cannot be built in the moment you need it. You can't suddenly become resilient when crisis hits. The work has to happen before. The training has to be in place. The neural pathways have to already exist. Marcus Aurelius wrote that no one can lose what they don't have. If you haven't built mental strength, you can't lose it in a crisis. But you also can't access it. It simply won't be there when you reach for it. This is why daily practice matters so much. Not because each individual session creates massive change, but because each session adds to the foundation that will support you when the storm comes. And the storm will come. This isn't pessimism, it's reality. Every human life includes loss, failure, disappointment, pain. The question is never whether you'll face difficulty, it's only whether you'll be prepared when you do. There's a beautiful metaphor that captures this. Imagine you're a sailor. You know that storms happen at sea. You can't control when they come or how severe they'll be, but you can prepare your ship. You can learn navigation skills. You can practice handling rough waters. You can build strength and endurance. The sailor who does this work isn't being pessimistic about the voyage. They're being realistic. And their realism doesn't make the journey less enjoyable. It makes it more enjoyable because they can sail with confidence rather than constant fear. You are that sailor. Your mind is your ship. Life is the sea. Storms are coming. The only question is whether your ship will be ready. If this video is resonating with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's struggling with pressure. Someone who hasn't yet learned that mental strength is built, not born. You could be the person who introduces them to ideas that change their life. Let me tell you about one more Stoic practice that's particularly relevant when you're actually in the midst of difficulty. They called it the view from above. When you're caught in a crisis, your perspective narrows. All you can see is the problem. It fills your entire vision. Everything else disappears. The view from above is a mental exercise to regain perspective. You imagine yourself rising up, looking down at your situation from a great height. You see yourself dealing with this difficulty. Then you see others around you also dealing with their own difficulties. Then you rise higher, seeing your city, your country, the world. You see humanity across time, countless people who faced similar challenges and survived them. From this height, your problem doesn't disappear. But it's placed in context. You see that this is one moment in a long life, one challenge among many you'll face and overcome. You see that others have endured similar or worse and found their way through. You see that you are part of a vast human story that includes incredible resilience and recovery. This perspective shift doesn't solve the problem, but it often breaks the panic spiral. It reminds you that this too shall pass, not as a cliché, but as an observable truth. Everything passes. Everything changes. This moment, however painful, is temporary. There's a reason this works so powerfully. When you're in crisis, your attention narrows to the immediate threat. This is a survival mechanism that served us well when threats were physical predators. But in modern life, this narrowed focus often works against us. We become so fixated on the problem that we lose all perspective. We can't see anything else. The problem becomes our entire world. The view from above forcibly expands your attention. It pulls you out of the tunnel and reminds you of the larger context. You see that your life contains much more than this one difficulty. You see that you have resources, relationships, experiences that exist outside the current crisis. You see that you have survived difficulties before and will likely survive this one too. I find it helpful to combine this with historical perspective. When I'm facing something hard, I sometimes think about what humans throughout history have endured: wars, famines, plagues, persecutions, people who faced genuine horror and somehow continued. Not because they were special, but because human beings are capable of extraordinary resilience when they have to be. This isn't to minimize current suffering. Your pain is real and valid, but perspective helps you access the part of you that can handle it. It reminds you that you come from a long line of survivors, that the capacity to endure is in your DNA, that you are more capable than your fear suggests. The Stoics practice this regularly, not just in crisis, but as part of their daily training. They would imagine looking at Earth from the stars, seeing the smallness of human concerns against the vastness of the cosmos. Not to diminish their lives, but to gain the perspective that makes difficulties manageable. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the passage of time and the vastness of existence. He would remind himself that even the greatest emperors were forgotten within a few generations, that the empires that seemed permanent crumbled to dust, that everything he worried about so intensely would one day be completely irrelevant. And strangely, this thought gave him peace. It freed him from the tyranny of taking everything too seriously. Now I want to talk about something that happens after crisis. Because surviving the initial blow is only part of the journey. What comes next matters just as much. When most people go through difficulty, they want to forget it as quickly as possible. They want to move on and pretend it never happened. This is understandable but counterproductive, because every difficulty contains lessons, and if you don't extract those lessons, you've suffered for nothing. The Stoics approached hardship as training. Every setback was an opportunity to practice virtue. Every failure was data about what needs to improve. Every loss was a reminder of what truly matters. They didn't just survive difficulty, they used it. This is what it means to grow from adversity rather than just endure it. When something hard happens, after the initial pain subsides, you ask, what can I learn here? How can I be better because of this? What does this experience teach me that I couldn't have learned any other way? Sometimes the lessons are practical. You learn what not to do next time. You discover weaknesses in your approach that you can strengthen. You gain experience that makes you more capable. But often, the lessons are deeper. You discover what you're capable of enduring. You find out who your real friends are. You clarify what actually matters to you. You develop compassion for others going through similar struggles. These lessons are worth more than the pain they cost. The philosopher Nietzsche, who was deeply influenced by Stoic thought, famously said that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. But he might have been more accurate to say what doesn't kill me has the potential to make me stronger if I approach it with the right mindset. The strengthening isn't automatic. It requires conscious extraction of the lessons. Let me share a final story that illustrates everything we've discussed. There was a Stoic philosopher named Epictetus who, as I mentioned, was born a slave. He was owned by a cruel master who, according to some accounts, deliberately broke his leg, leaving him lame for life. Now imagine being Epictetus, born into slavery, physically disabled by your owner's cruelty, no wealth, no status, no freedom. By any conventional measure, a life of complete disadvantage. Every excuse to be bitter, to give up, to break under the weight of circumstances. But Epictetus became one of the most influential teachers of mental freedom in human history. His lectures were attended by senators and students alike. His ideas influenced Roman emperors and continue to influence people today, 2,000 years later. How is this possible? Because Epictetus understood something that most people never grasp. He could control his mind. He could control his response to circumstances. He could control what meaning he assigned to his experiences. And that control, that internal freedom, was more powerful than any external circumstance. He famously said that circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him to himself. His slavery, his disability, his hardship, these didn't break him because he had trained his mind to be unbreakable. They revealed to him the strength that was always there, the strength that preparation and practice had built. There's a specific teaching of Epictetus that captures the essence of what we've been discussing. He taught his students to focus on what he called their ruling faculty, the part of the mind that makes judgments and choices. He said that no external force can compel this ruling faculty to do anything. Others can imprison your body, but they cannot imprison your mind. They can take your possessions, but they cannot take your thoughts. They can threaten your life, but they cannot make you afraid if you choose not to be. This is a radical claim, and Epictetus lived it. As a slave, he had no external freedom whatsoever, yet he developed more internal freedom than people who had everything. He proved through his own life that the mind can be trained to be unconquerable, regardless of circumstances. Some might say this is easy to talk about but impossible to achieve, and it's true that few of us will reach the level of mental discipline that Epictetus demonstrated. But that's not the point. The point is direction, not destination. Every step you take toward mental preparation is a step away from fragility. Every day you practice is a day you become slightly more resilient. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be moving in the right direction. I think about this when I face difficulties in my own life. I'm not a Stoic sage. I still get anxious, still feel fear, still sometimes react in ways I regret. But I'm better than I was a year ago, and a year from now, if I keep practicing, I'll be better still. The goal isn't to eliminate all negative reactions. The goal is to handle them more effectively, to recover more quickly, to not be destroyed by what used to destroy me. And that's achievable, not through willpower alone, but through daily practice. Not through reading about Stoicism, but through living it, not through understanding the concepts, but through embodying them in how you actually respond when life gets hard. This is the promise of Stoic mental training. Not that you'll never face hardship, but that hardship will reveal your strength rather than destroy you. Not that life will be easy, but that you'll be equal to whatever life brings. As we come to the close of this video, I want to leave you with something to carry forward. Strength is not something you find in the moment of crisis. It's something you build before crisis arrives. Every day that you don't practice is a day you remain unprepared. Every day that you avoid facing your fears is a day those fears grow stronger. Every day that you choose comfort over growth is a day you become more fragile. But it works the other way too. Every day that you practice the premeditation of evils is a day you become more prepared. Every day that you face a fear is a day that fear weakens. Every day that you choose growth over comfort is a day you become more resilient. The choice is yours, and it's made not once, but every single day. The person you'll be in the next crisis is being shaped right now by what you do today. Marcus Aurelius wrote these words to himself near the end of his life, after decades of practicing Stoic philosophy while ruling the Roman Empire through plague, war, and personal tragedy. He wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is the final message. The strength is already within you. The capacity for resilience exists in your mind right now, but it must be developed, it must be trained, it must be built through daily practice before the storm arrives. Don't wait for crisis to discover whether you can handle it. Train now, prepare now, build now, because the storm is coming. It always comes, and when it does, you'll either break or bend. The deciding factor is what you do today. I want to leave you with one more thought. The work we've discussed today isn't just about surviving difficulty, it's about being free. Most people live as prisoners of fear. They're afraid of loss, afraid of failure, afraid of pain, afraid of what might happen. This fear limits everything they do. It keeps them small, safe, but never truly alive. The person who has genuinely prepared for the worst is free in a way that others can't understand. They've already faced their fears mentally. They've already accepted that terrible things might happen. They've already made peace with the impermanence of everything they love. And having done this work, they're liberated to fully live. They can take risks that terrified people won't take. They can love without the constant fear of loss. They can pursue goals without being paralyzed by fear of failure. They can be present in each moment because they're not constantly worried about the future. They can enjoy what they have because they've already contemplated losing it. This is the paradox of Stoic practice. Facing the worst makes you more positive, not less. Accepting impermanence makes you appreciate permanence more deeply. Preparing for difficulty makes everyday life more enjoyable. The peace you're looking for isn't found by avoiding thoughts of difficulty. It's found by walking through those thoughts until you come out the other side. It's found by training your mind to be strong enough to hold everything, the good and the bad, the joy and the sorrow, the hope and the fear. You have that capacity within you. We all do. The only question is whether you'll develop it. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this video has shifted something in your thinking, leave a like to show me that this kind of content matters. Subscribe if you want to continue building mental strength through ideas that have stood the test of time. And comment below with the word strength so I know you made it through and you're committed to building what can't be built in the moment you need it. Remember, you're not fragile. You're just untrained. And training can begin right now. See you in the next video.